Hi everyone, this is Aaron Gross here. Thanks for coming to this masterclass on building confidence, resilient confidence. We're going to learn where confidence really comes from, how it works. Just a little bit about me. I've worked past 26 years in education. I was one of those wayward, wild kids that wasn't really that confident in himself personally. But when you understand where real confidence comes from and how your mind works, this might shed some light on how to install that within yourself and within your loved ones, your kids, and deal with challenges, whether they're from your kids or from life in general. So for the first 20 minutes or so, we're going to go through a presentation that I prepared in PowerPoint, and then after that, we'll have a Q&A. So I'll just bring up the presentation. I'll share my screen. Okay. So when it comes to achieving our goals in life, finding a partner, getting a job, going to a meeting that you might be nervous about, there's one thing that can get in the way of the success of all these things. That is a feeling of a lack of confidence, which is quite common. And especially when you've tried before and you failed and you've had some setbacks, maybe somebody called you something not nice, you lost a job, was rejected on a job application, you failed an exam, etc. All these things can affect you. So before we go any further, let's see what confidence is. So could I say that confidence is the feeling of trust in my ability to achieve whatever I want? So if I want to achieve a good mark in maths, I might have confidence. I might have a confident feeling that says, yeah, you know, you can do this. And you've got a great ability in maths, and you can achieve a good maths mark. So how do I get this feeling of confidence? Well, let's look at the classic model of what most people think confidence is. So you start with a small realistic goal, which is easy to have confidence in. You put in the recipe, a little bit of hard work, that leads to some improvement, and you have some small amount of success. Now here comes the important part. The success is supposed to generate positive thoughts, which feeds into your confidence, and that initiates a positive feedback loop. And as a result of that, your confidence then increases. And then you're going to do more hard work, get more improvement, have greater success. Again, turning around those positive thoughts that leads to even greater confidence. And that happens on and on until you reach your dreams. Now that sounds all fine and dandy, with one little problem. Just as this loop works in generating confidence, but if you encounter a failure, maybe you're failing at the subject, or maybe your dad says something hurtful about you and your abilities, or maybe you experience a rejection from a friend or a partner or some sort of negative feedback. As a result of that, this creates a negative feedback loop. That's what we've started now. And before you know it, the hard work's gone, the improvement's gone, all from failing. So it always seems like this confidence is thwarted by our negative thoughts. And our thoughts always seem to win. And the more you analyze it, the more you get caught up, and the lower your confidence goes. You're just on a downward spiral. So what's the use of having this confidence when everything's fine and right and dandy, and then all of a sudden you get a slap in the face and the confidence left as quickly as it came? The confidence that we're really looking for is going to be the type of confidence that I'm talking about today. It'll persist in the face of negative thoughts, in the face of failure, in the face of just about anything. And the good news about this type of confidence, what I'm talking about here, is you've already got it inside you. It's always immediately accessible by you. But there's something that's stopping you from accessing it. And it's what I explain to be this fundamental misunderstanding of where confidence really comes from. And the misunderstanding is that your confidence is caused by external circumstances. So here you've got your confidence, which is an internal thing, and we think we need something out there. I need to score the job, land the perfect partner, pass the test in order for my internal confidence to increase. Now, I can understand that many of you would say, look, Aaron, that's not a misunderstanding. That's true. If I do well in my job or in my exam, I'm going to have an increase in confidence. And whenever it's the other way around, I have a decrease in confidence. And some of you might say, well, look, I failed for the third time my test and I experienced a loss of confidence. Is that a misunderstanding? Am I not supposed to feel that way? So I'm not saying how you're supposed to feel. I'm not saying where you should feel this way, that way, happy, sad, confident, or lack of confidence. You can't control your feelings most of the time anyway. However, what I am saying is that, yeah, we do fail our exams. Yes, people end up in divorce. Yes, we have fights with our kids and our friends and our partners. And yes, we do experience a lack of confidence as a result of these external circumstances. But the cause of that feeling is not the rejection. It's not the fighting with your kids or your partner or your friend or your spouse. It's not from failing your exams. So what's the cause of this lack of confidence? So let's just back up over here and let's go to La La Land. Let's go to Dreamland. In a dream, we create and perceive our world simultaneously. And our mind does it so well that we don't even know that it's happening. And the same is true for your waking reality. Sydney Banks would say that this world that we live in is a divine dream suspended in time, space, and what was the last one? Time, space, and matter. So we're awake in our sleep, so to speak, if I can use that. This world is a divine dream created via our thinking. And we don't realize that we're the creators of our own movie 24/7. That doesn't mean there's not a reality out there. But what I'm saying is your experience of that reality comes via the movie projector of your thought. So we create and perceive the world simultaneously. And our mind does it so well, we don't even realize it's happening. Thought comes along and makes a mountain out of a molehill and then points the finger at someone else. It's him that did it. And we don't realize that it's actually our thoughts that did it. So we've got this data stream from the outside world and it flows in through your senses. And it's just a bunch of inputs. And those inputs are from sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch. But the data stream by itself is just a bunch of meaningless electric signals, and it flows into your mind. And that's what helps you generate your experience. Now, your mind has to construct a model of what has to be out there. So your mind takes in through those senses the info from the outside world, and it processes it. It constructs a model of the world using your thoughts as the building block for that experience. Thoughts, as we know, they could be from your past memories, from an experience you had, from your imaginations, your belief, your religion, your ideas, your judgments, and so on. And they're all going to influence on the way you think about that data coming in from the outside world. This model of the world is built using thought inside your own head, and that's what you end up experiencing. You never experience an outside world. You only experience your thoughts about the outside world. Now, I'm not saying that you actually create your own outside world. You actually create a world via thinking. What I am saying is you create your own unique version of the world, your own unique experience of the world via thinking. Let's look at an example. You've got a little girl and she's scared of a shadow. And she thinks that her fear is coming from her shadow. But actually the fear is not coming from the shadow. The fear is coming by what she's thinking about the shadow. So this little girl is in a misunderstanding. Now her fear is absolutely real for her, that she's afraid of her shadow. To her, she's absolutely sure it comes from the shadow. But we know otherwise now, that the real cause isn't the shadow. The ultimate cause is her thinking. Another girl, she's also looking at her shadow. And that's why the other girl can experience joy when she sees her shadow. So it's possible for two people having the same circumstances and yet have two totally unique, different experiences. Now, there's another very important thing worth noting here. If the first girl wants to overcome a fear of shadows, she doesn't have to get rid of her negative thoughts. She just has to understand that her thoughts are thoughts. They're her machinations of her imagination inside her own head. And with that knowledge, if she knew that, oh, I'm making this up, she wouldn't take her fear so intensely, and it would abate. Let's have a look at an adult's example here. John and Sam, they're in trouble. They failed their exam yet again. And now they are sent to the principal. And they hear the same words, useless. But they're both having unique thoughts about the situation. It just so happens that John's mind extracts a memory from his childhood and he connects it to the current experience he's got now. Because his dad used to put him down and really, get stuck into him, and he's subconsciously, without even realizing, joining his past negative experience to the current one. So he's got a lot of weight on his mind. This is a double whammy for John on the left over here. And it's very painful and a very intense feeling. His mind might label this experience as a loss of self-esteem, I'm hopeless, but because John doesn't realize that his feelings being produced by his own thinking that's happening in this moment right now, he thinks the feeling's coming from the yelling of the principal, which is a mistake. And he immediately concludes that this yelling has caused me to lose my self-esteem and I am totally hopeless. Now, his friend Sam, on the other hand, he's also experiencing humiliating thoughts, and to some degree, he's got an understanding, okay, I'm just going through a bad run at the moment. They're just my thoughts that I'm experiencing at the moment. But when I get out of the principal's office, I'll be fine. So do you see how both of these guys have the exact same external stimuli, but two totally unique experiences? You never experience people or circumstances. You only experience your own version of those experiences and circumstances via thought. You never experience what people think about you. You only experience what people think about, you only experience what you think people think about you. I'll say that again, that's a bit of a mouthful. You never experience what people think about you. You only experience what you think people think about you. So it always goes through your thought. I used to be really scared to do all sorts of things, even things like this mastermind presentation over here. I'd be very scared because what will people think? Who cares what people think? The only experience I have is what I think and what I think about what they think. But I used to be scared of what people thought. I'm not so scared anymore. You never get an experience of the outside world. You only get an experience of your thinking about the outside world. So let's see how this translates into the good old classroom. So there's good old Sam and John. Sam's a lot quiet. He's got a bit of a smile on his face there. Sam's got a smile. John hasn't. And the only thing, therefore, on John's mind is x plus y equals z. Come along, John. He's also got x plus y equals z, but he's got a lot more on his mind. He's still got a lot of cluttered thought that's going back to his principal telling him off, as well as subconsciously not even realizing the bad experience that he's carrying with his dad getting stuck into him as well. It doesn't matter what the thoughts are. It doesn't matter whether they're true or they're false or they're right or they're wrong or he's scared or he's not scared, whether he thinks he'll pass or whether he'll fail. What matters is, and what John doesn't unfortunately understand is, they're just thoughts. So he thinks he's got to take them really seriously. And this results in his mind getting all distracted and cluttered and not fully present to the instructor's teaching. Hence, his understanding in the class suffers, which is a real shame because John really has the ability of a top performer in the classroom. But the only thing that determines how much he'll use of his own amazing ability to learn is how real he thinks his other distracting thoughts are. It just depends on whether he thinks they're worth paying attention to. That's it. That's all there comes to it. If he didn't take his thinking so seriously, imagine how he'd be. He'd be running a lot lighter like Sam over there and taking in the class. But because John doesn't realize what's happening inside his mind, he thinks he's not able to understand what's being taught in the classroom, and therefore he thinks he doesn't have the ability to understand what's being taught, and therefore the poor guy is trying to build up his confidence and think positive and fight with himself, and it's just not working. I'm not against positive thinking, by the way, but it just doesn't always work in extreme, severe situations where people are experiencing real anxiety. So good old John, he's going to try and bring a positive thoughts into the mix. And what is he left with? He just goes back and forth, positive, negative. He's fighting with himself. Yeah, I got to think positive, but it just doesn't work. And that, as a result, he's just left with even more clutter in his mind. His understanding is even more suppressed, and his performance in the classroom and his grades are even less. What's the result? When the results finally comes out, he thinks, I always knew this. I always knew I'd be bad at maths. And that's exactly what happens to us when we experience lack of confidence as well. We just take our thoughts in the moment too seriously. We try to control them, which usually makes the situation worse. We could avoid all this by understanding how the mind works. You never get to experience life or people or circumstances. You only experience your thoughts about life, people, and circumstances. Like we saw earlier, we discussed this earlier. So when you think I've lost my confidence, it just means that I'm really currently experiencing thoughts about loss of self-confidence. When you think something like, oh, my sad childhood is responsible for my loss of self-esteem, it just means that you're having thoughts about a sad childhood and loss of self-esteem. Your thoughts and your experiences are intimately connected together like two sides of the one coin. Your experience is a reflection of what you're thinking. You think sad childhood, you experience sad childhood. You think thoughts of I'm a failure, you experience feelings of failure feelings. But to change the experience, you just need a different thought. But you don't need a different childhood. You don't need a different father. You don't need a different mother. You don't need a different spouse, even if you felt you were abused. Thought is the missing link. And what's happened in the past is gone. And it's only carried in time via thought. So you relive the past only if you're thinking about it. Let's look at how the mind works. Your thoughts can have an infinite number of forms. They say that whatever they want. However, when it comes to your mind, it's just got two states. A clear flow of thoughts or a cluttered flow of thoughts. Clear flow of thoughts and a cluttered flow of thoughts. And both of these states happen absolutely naturally. Whenever your mind encounters something which is new, which is uncertain, where there's a chance of failure, rejection, and humiliation, it naturally focuses a lot of energy on it, giving rise to a lot of thoughts inside your mind, and you experience a lot of clutter. The feeling is what you end up labeling as a lack of self-confidence. You could have labeled it something else like anxiety or crushing of self-esteem. My life is destroyed. I'm a loser. I'm dumb. I'm stupid. No one will ever love me, whatever it is. But that label that you use to describe your feelings is really irrelevant. It doesn't matter. All that counts is that you're experiencing a clutter of thoughts in your mind right now. Whatever labels you give it, really, you don't need to take it seriously. And what do you normally do when this clutter happens? We normally get all worked up trying to think positive thinking and trying to work out the situation. Well, guys, the good news is I'm going to tell you something different. You have to do nothing at all. Zip nada. All that is true is that you experience the clutter of thoughts, and if you leave it, it's just going to settle. Because your mind has what we call this self-correcting mechanism. When left alone, the clutter clears up. If you leave the clutter alone long enough, it settles down, just like a glass of muddy water, for example. If you've got a glass of water with dirt inside it, you stir it up, the mud's flying everywhere, it's gloomy and dark and yucky. But when you set that glass down and you leave it alone, guess what happens to the dirt in the water? It settles and you become clear. Your mind has the same capabilities to self-correct. If you leave those thoughts alone, they'll subside sooner or later, and you'll come to your default state of a clear mind with common sense, wisdom that's always been there behind the muddy, cluttered thinking. The only thing that prevents you from having that clarity, from preventing this self-correcting mechanism working, is that you're playing with it, you're interfering with it, you're thinking too much. So thoughts are not real. They're just a creation of your own imagination. Now, I don't mean that they're not real in the sense that if you're thinking about me speaking to you, that's not what I'm saying is not real. Is when we get carried away with our thinking in our imagination about how bad we think things are. So this self-correction mechanism, we said, fails only if we interfere with it. You think you've got to do something with it. You believe that the thoughts that you're experiencing are actually reality, and you've got to control them. Sure, sometimes you can control them, but very often when it comes to something that is really stressful, you fail in your thought control and you get all more caught up. It's like a snowball. The mess just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. The ball gets bigger and bigger. The snowball just collects more snow. It gets bigger and more. You're taking it more seriously. And you're getting so caught up, well, I've got to try and think positive. I've got to try and build my confidence. I've got to try and control the situation. And always what happens is it just gets worse. There's a saying in our Hasidic Kabbalistic texts in a book called the Tanya, book 1, chapter 22. It says, I'll say it in English, anyone who fights someone that's dirty will get soiled themselves. So you're getting all worked up over nothing. But if you can see that your thoughts are not real and they're just a creation of your own imagination running over time wild, when you're getting carried away, that's what I mean about them not being real, you lose the urge to control and to resist and to eliminate your negative thinking, and you lose that urge to do something by trying to build up this self-confidence. Now, again, there's nothing wrong in positive thinking at certain times, and we can control our thoughts at certain times. But when we're out of control, just losing the plot, that's a spiritual signal telling us, hey, stop, take a breath and step back. So when you realize that, and for a change, you just let the thoughts go, inevitably they'll settle down and you'll move back to your default correcting mechanism of clarity, of a clear mind, of confidence. So what you thought was confidence was nothing really but a state of clarity, a clear mind, common sense, which is your mind's default state that's always lying there within you if you're willing to look for it. The only time you lose it is when you fall into the misunderstanding that my experience is coming from something other than thought. Well, my experience is coming from my kid acting up. My feeling is coming because my wife is screaming at me. My kid is screaming at me. The teacher's screaming. No, your experience actually comes from your thinking about what they're doing to you. And then you start chasing. I've got to get better marks. I've got to try and fix the situation. I'm not saying you shouldn't try and get better marks. I'm just saying you shouldn't take your thinking about it so seriously. And the paradox of results are that when you just ease up on what you're trying to aim for, you often get closer to that. So once you see how your mind really works, you know that the solution is not to run faster, but to actually slow down. That way you won't fall into the illusions that your mind keeps creating when it's getting carried away in the moment. And when that happens, your negative thoughts will continue to arise, but now that you see them for what they are, they're just thoughts, their impact starts to soften. You start to soften. The situation gets a little bit softer, and you get a little bit more malleable and flexible and strategic in the way you look at the situation. And those thoughts about rejection and lack of confidence, they all just seem to not necessarily disappear, but you don't take them so intensely because you're slowing down. You know, animals, when they're looking for their prey, they stop running. They walk really slowly and they look far and look wide. And they're open to what they don't yet see to find the animal of prey that they want to pounce on. If we become like an animal in the sense that we slow down, just relax, take a deep breath, leave it, and come back to it later, then your resilience starts coming out. Your strategic thinking will become manifest. Your common sense comes through and you become more persistent. Then positive thinking will become a natural for you because you're coming from a clear mind and you're not even trying. It just happens organically. As I can say, it's happened so many times with me. You just begin to see people and things and situations more lovingly, compassionately, and understandingly. And after all, isn't that what confidence is all about? That was my PowerPoint presentation. I hope I've elicited some sort of questions from you of curiosity or something else within you that might generate some sort of new perspective on confidence. This is being recorded, so if you don't ask questions now, you can always email them into me later and reach out and I'll try my best to answer you. But right now, we're going to just have a Q&A.